Tęsėme mūsų seminarą tema duomenų apsauga.
We continue our seminar on data protection, and we will now hear on data protection and cybercrime from Dr. Anatoly Nechiporenko, Information Systems Administrator of Lithuanian Chamber of Notaries. Anatoly Nechiporenko, the floor is yours. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'll make a presentation in Lithuanian, and it might differ from the presentations you previously heard from our speakers on legal matters. On the declarative part of the BDAR, my presentation will differ. It will be on the imperative, on the implementation and the threats. I will cover the ways to protect yourselves from the threats and to prevent yourself from becoming a victim of data theft. I have three subtopics. First, I will talk about the fundamentals and the guiding principles of data protection. Next, I will talk about cybercrime. And last but not least, I will talk about remote notarial actions and the threats that belie them. First and foremost, let me tell you that we personally store some kind of data. This refers to archiving and storage of data for a long time. Data must be archived under our laws, and they contain personal data. We also have data that is not archived. Data you may well know about, such as mail correspondence, draft contracts, scanned versions of clients' documents, personal data and documents sent to you by clients, scanned documents. And you have those documents on your system very often in your offices, in your workplace computers, in your email box. Please don't forget that this data also has its own storage policy or data retention policy and a life cycle. A life cycle of data starts when you get the data, continues when you work with the data, and when the data is no longer necessary. You may all know that you receive an claim from the client. You need to search for or ask for certain client's documents on ownership. You may need documents from other parties of the transaction, and you have, as a result, a number of documents on the basis of which you create a document. Where do you later put all the data? Maybe they still remain on your workplace computers. Unfortunately, they also contain personal data. The Lithuanian Chamber of Notaries has provided certain recommendations and general guidelines on protection of personal data and on the principles for treatment of personal data. Article 6 says that based on BDAR, on GDPR, the principle of data retention limitation, data may only be retained as long as the need for their processing is in place, and not longer than that. How do we implement that provision? We had contacts with notaries on that matter. I was interested in the ways they receive emails, the timeline when they how they retain draft contracts, and how they erase them. I heard that after the notarial action is completed, the notaries do their best to delete the data, but not always as soon as we would want them to. The reason why some of the data is not erased immediately without the possibility to revive them, one of the reasons is possible legal consequences, such as disputes with a client. A client might have asked for one thing and received something quite the other, and client's wishes might have been not implemented in the contract, and correspondence may be used to prove that who was right, who was wrong. But to my opinion, this is not to be allowed. It is illegal, unlawful, and data can only be retained insofar as there is a need for the treatment or processing of the data. Our email service for the Lithuanian Notariat has migrated recently, and we noticed that a number of notaries have the long time archive of correspondence with clients where correspondence dates back to a year still remains in place on their computers. This demonstrates that they can treat the data and can learn from the data, but this also creates a risk that this data may be stolen, and should they be stolen, there would be a lot of data. That would be a lot of data, and that would be more data than would be the case in the case where you process the data and delete them faster than you normally do. How do you store? How should data be stored in a notary's work? You clearly understand that you have a workplace computer. This is we talk about your workplace computers, computers of your staff. All the data and all the contracts are drafted in your trailer office. You have also an email. You may think an email is an email, but please note that an email is a very important thing, because through emails your data may leak. Your email is a portal to the so-called private area of private data. Notary is responsible for protecting that data. You also have IT systems. IT systems that are used for the work of notaries. In Lithuania, we have a system called e-notaras, or e-notary, electronic notary. We store personal data and data of all contracts there. The data on e-notary system is processed under Lithuanian laws. Some notaries may not think that personal data are also stored on their representative websites. If you are a notary, if you have your website where you allow customers to register for meetings with you, for appointments, for a certain time, your clients will leave not only their name, their surname, their telephone, and maybe even their email. And this is personal data. You have to be serious about this. If your website retains this data, you have to erase the data on a timely, in a timely manner. After the notarial action is completed, you have to delete the data, erase the data. I'm a person who works with technical things rather than law. Our main aspects on data security and on cyber security contain 3 building blocks. They are called in English the CIA. This stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Šiais 3 aspektais vadovaujantis yra vertinamas sistemų saugumas,
system security and impacts are assessed based on CIA, on confidentiality, integrity, and availability principles. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As far as confidentiality is concerned, this is your ability to provide protection of data. How do you do that? Encrypt them. You can also lock them in an internal system to which access is only available through your notary's office. And it also contains all measures that ensure the protection of your data. What is integrity? This aspect ensures that data is not changed. The data you have and the data that must be present in a contract have to be there. They may not be changed by third parties. No third party may enter the data and change them or abuse them. How can it be abused? Let's say they may be erased or encrypted. This would mean abuse of integrity of your data. So this aspect is very important. Finally, availability of data is the third principle. If you have any data, but you cannot access them, the data is of no use. Let's say you have data on your work server, but the server has broken down or became inaccessible. You cannot access your data. As a result, you cannot work in line with your functions. Well, the data will not be stolen, but you cannot access it either. Please note continuity of work is very important. All these 3 aspects, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, contribute to business continuity. And notaries, as data subjects, must ensure the continuity of their activities. You must have or may have a business continuity plan. And I recommend you to have a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan. Please do note what kind of data is stored on all computers of your office, and or at least part of your computers as well as backup copies are stored on your computers. The storage of backup copies must ensure the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of data. Therefore, it is necessary to encrypt the data before storage. Cryptography functions allow you to check the integrity of the copies of the data. Availability is ensured by storing backup copies in an office backup location. So you may want to send your data to an off-site backup location.
Baigiant šią dalį, noriu perskaityti
In completion of this part of my presentation, one of the main principles is that after the storage or retention period ends, when this personal data is no longer necessary for the purposes it was used, is the documents and their copies based on the rules for processing, transfer, and retention of documents shall be destroyed unless the data are archived in line with the Lithuanian laws. The documents and their copies must be destroyed, so none of them or parts of them can be recreated or restored. Let us now move to cybercrime. One of the most important and crucial aspects for stealing data and for data breaches and breaches of rights of certain individuals or persons, one of the greatest and most serious threats are ransomware attacks and encrypting attacks. This is a very widespread sort of attack, form of attack. The attack is organized in order to get some ransom or some money in exchange. In English, it's called ransomware. You can look up on Google about ransomware. DDoS attacks, or distributed denial of service attacks, are not so important for notaries. They are more important for IT staff, because thanks to them, information systems operation can be stopped and will not be available for some time. Phishing is another form of attack. Let us say you receive a link and an email with a link. In the email, you will be asked to do certain action. I will talk about that later. And social engineering is also a malign activity where persons call you and they represent themselves as other persons. They try to get some information from you, some data from you, or they try to make somebody do some action, and the impact of that action will be useful for the person, for the author of the attack. Electronic payment, cryptocurrency-related actions on the internet are also quite dangerous. Let me now give you several examples of what happens in your may happen in your daily life. It happens in my daily life. It happens in daily lives of my colleagues. Let's say you you are a user of any email box. You receive an IMG format attachment, and your email message will say, please open the attachment because it contains important data. In the case of a notary, the email may say that it contains in the attachment a scanned passport or a scanned contract, and the message and the email will say, this attachment contains my information, please open it. After you open the attachment, another zip archive will open up, and there will be another file inside. It will say, open this file. Or maybe sometimes you will open the document and you will see a document, but at the same time there will be a malign attack on your computer. The entire computer and the entire internal network, wherever the program will find data, it may start encrypting the data. It takes a lot of time, not just 1 second or 2 seconds, because all the files, all the data is encrypted. As a result, you receive a notification on your screen or a letter that all of your data is encrypted, and you will ask for a ransom. You will be told what kind of sum you need to pay in order to reach the data that is encrypted by the malign software. How do you work against this? First of all, you need to have backup copies. Backup copies are vastly important. Sometimes you may think it's too expensive. Sometimes you think it's complicated, but you do need the support of IT staff, and they can provide you with software which will do that on an automatic basis. Making backup copies is vastly important. Once it's automated, it will not ask or invite any additional action from you. When backup copies are made immediately or on a timely basis, you may only lose the results of your work of 1 day or 2 days, but not more of the results of your day. And you can always restore the data, because contracts are always signed by hand, also, and you can always restore data, or at least you will not lose the data accounting for your entire career or for entire year. What about DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks? Malign actors may want to order a distributed denial of service attack targeted against you. It's an attack against an IT system where too many functions are enacted so that the system is at a loss of which order to implement and stops working. To notaries, this happens seldom. The notarial system of Lithuania has not faced such high attacks so far, but your notarial office IT address may be attacked by DDoS, and you may lose an internet connection for some time. Of course, we do have our mobile phones with us always, and we can always turn on the access point and use our internet connection via mobile phone. The DDoS attacks usually last for some time because they are quite resource intense, so sometimes they may last up to a year. Now, data security breaches and phishing. Phishing is a widespread form of attack. The user is often receiving an email, and for instance, it says that you are addressed by, let's say, a DHL or a DPD or the Lithuanian Post, Lietuvos paštas, and the email asks you to contribute with information because they ask for your name, surname, email, telephone number, and this way you can open your personal data, which may not be nice sometimes
ir pateikti kažkam tai
and provide somebody with some malign actor with that
kitas
data.
yra dar būdas būtent phishing.
Another type of phishing
Laišką, kuriame nurodoma, kad
is a case where you receive an email which says that your
laiškams vietos.
email is full, there's no more storage space, and you're asked to enter a link and to connect to that link. By doing that, you can demonstrate your user account, and this will open the door for data theft. All email addresses may be sent from your computer, and they also may be destroyed, all of them. So you have to be very serious about this.
Aš savo pranešime turiu, aišku, ir rekomendacijų.
My presentation also contains some recommendations,
Mes pereisim toliau, aš galbūt į pabaigą tada.
but I will give them to you at the end of my
Savo veiksmus,
presentation.
gaus tokius laiškus, ką atlikti. Nuotolinis notarinių veiksmų tvirtinimas Lietuvoje įsigaliojo
Remote
2015 metų.
authentication of notarial actions is in place in Lithuania since last year. A number of notarial actions have already been completed. We have pooled our efforts so that now we can do notarial actions even while we're at home or on vacation. But there are some threats, especially for notaries, because notaries are the party which
Atlieka veiksmą su
completes an action
nutolusiu asmeniu, kuriuos
Where,
reikia nustatyti.
in cooperation with a remote person. And it's sometimes quite misleading because the identity of that person may be changed. Let's take the example of remote meetings. A remote meeting is a format in which a notary interacts live with a client. What are the threats there? Well, first of all, you must only use the software provided by your software provider. In Lithuania, we use Microsoft Teams for video conferencing and for contacting our clients. And we use DocBit platform for signing electronic documents. It might happen in your life where your clients will tell you, I cannot access your link, it's impossible, can we please use another format of video conferencing, such as WhatsApp, FaceTime, or any other tool that is freely available to all. Please note that you must stop this immediately. You should not agree to this proposal from your client. You must stop your notarial action immediately and never join the other video conferencing platform. Your client may also say that he cannot sign the document via DocBit. He may say, well, there's another platform, please connect to it and authenticate the action. Please don't do this, because you never know what what your email e-signature may be used for in the future. You may sign a document, but this may only be a cover for selling your own real estate to a third party in a third country. It's a very dangerous action. So never connect to the platforms offered by your clients insofar as authentication is concerned. All links are generated, in our case, only via the e-notary system. And these are the safe systems. These are the safe links. Other links are not safe. Another important risk related to remote notary actions, which has not been seen in Lithuania so far, but technologically possible, is the threat of deepfake. where in real time a human face is replaced by another person's face. You may think it's impossible, but if you look up deepfake in YouTube, you will see famous actors and their faces on video screens where they never were, in fact. And you will see scenes from films with one actor replaced by a face of another actor. In our notary's work, we think we will never see that. Unfortunately, I think the technology allows this, and we may see similar attacks. So how do we protect ourselves? In real time, during video conferencing, so far the technology doesn't allow humans to be moving fast, where faces move fast, where the head is tilted, or turned to the right, or turned to the right, or to the left. It's quite hard for the technology to imitate that. These parameters are quite hard for algorithms to tackle. So if you have any problems seeing the client's face, or if you have any doubt about the client's face on the screen, if you think that the client's face is falsified, please ask your client to turn his head to the right or left, up or down. And if you see that the face seems to change the quality of vision or changes the color, please ask your client to come to your notary's office physically. This way, you will protect the person on whose behalf an attacker might be acting. In order to prevent deepfake technologies, you can also use biometrics. There are algorithms that can compare a person's face to a photo present in the resident register, in the population register. And so the photo in your ID may be compared against a photo in the on the screen. This will help to calculate whether the person in front of the screen is similar to the person whose identity he uses and whose photo is in the population register. In Lithuania, we are now launching this tool, and will soon be able to offer you biometric verification tool. The biometric verification tool also allows to conduct the so-called liveness detection. This means that you will be sure that you have a person in front of you, in front of the screen, and not just a photo of somebody. You will be sure that the person is sitting live against the camera and not just putting his photo, which acts as if it's a real person. This biometrics tool will also allow to establish whether it's not a deep fake also. So we will have all tools in place to safeguard our notaries from these types of attacks.
Kol kas dar ne, aš turiu dar medžiagos, kuri yra taip. Taigi, dėl priemonių.
As for our recommendations, what are the best ways to deal with the threats I've covered? You may think you are being scared. Well, please don't be scared. Simply be informed about the threats. Our recommendations to protect the personal data include annual reviews of ports of your work computers and servers or mobile devices. The scanning of these ports and audit of software is crucially important. This is necessary in order to prevent the creation of conditions for malign software, opening the door to personal data theft. Computers and the network have to be protected against violations and you must update your router, your computer, all your mobile devices on a regular basis as required by the producer. Software needs permanent updating. You cannot just buy a computer and never update it in 10 years' time. No. And only certified or qualified experts must update your software. It's equally important to ensure monitoring. You need to monitor the devices of your network. Of course, it costs you additional money, but through monitoring, you can also notice the signs of attacks. You can notice data theft, and you can always learn when data theft took place, because IT means we have a time frame. We have an IT and time frame with the past, the present, and the future, and all things that happened in the past may not be changed. If data was stolen in the past, you will never restore them. But if you learn about the fact of data theft, you can prevent the data theft in future. Because data theft doesn't just happen within one day. No, it's usually happening within a longer period of time. A thief will ask you for a ransom, maybe when you need some sensitive data, and the thief can also sell data to other subjects. So that's important to know. As to data, personal data, you need to use unique passwords to access personal data. If you have in your notary office 3, 4, or more computers, and you have a server, or if one of the computers serves as a server, you must protect them by passwords. The shared folders must be protected with passwords. Access to personal data must be available only to those persons or staff who work, who make certain actions with that data at a certain period of time. And let's say in your office you have one employee working with physical, natural persons and other employees working with legal persons. Don't put all your files into one place. Some employees must only have their access to some files and others to other files. The principle of the least privileges should govern these actions. You must ensure the protection of software from malign activities such as viruses. You must have antivirus tools, or at least Defender if you have Microsoft tools. It's also crucial to make backup copies, to decipher, verify, and back up your copies at least in 3 places physically. That's very important. If you have any questions on the implementation of these steps, you can always address me. We will always provide you with recommendations. We will find staff who can make an audit of your network and help you on all those aspects that I have covered today. Thank you. And I have one small question to you. As today is a day when we work in questions and answers form, I have a question on the second page of your handout. It's the very last practical case. A notary's client has learned that the contract concluded by the client and certified by the notary became available to third parties. An electronic document there is a chance that the contract could have been fraudulently seized, stolen, or copied from the notary office. What steps should the notary take if there is suspicion that the contract in question has been fraudulently seized in the notary's office? You have 6 answers, possible answers. So you have a multiple choice question. One of the answers is check the notary's own computer and those of staff of the notary's office for a possible virus attack. Second, change the password of the Wi-Fi network of the notary's office. 3, check if all the data sharing folders or databases are password protected. 4, if the contract was sent by email, change the password of the email and inform the entity in charge of administration of the notary's mailbox. 5, notify the competent supervisory authority of the incident. And 6, recommend that the client takes care of the protection of their own data. You may clearly see that most of the answers are right, apart from the last one, recommend that the client takes care of the protection of his or her own data. It's laughable because maybe the data can be leaked from the client. So let me tell you without further ado that you should truly check your own computer and those of the staff of your office for a possible virus attack, because data is often stolen through virus attacks. You have a virus in your computer, and then the virus may send or leak your data, or encrypt your data, and so on. Why should you change the password of the Wi-Fi network of the notary's office? Well, if you give that password to third persons, they could have joined the Wi-Fi network and get this data through the Wi-Fi network. If you, unless your databases and backup files were password protected, that's why you need to check if all the data sharing folders and databases are password protected. As for the email, if third parties had access to your email, then they could have stolen your contract. So you must inform the entity in charge of administration of the notary's mailbox, and you must change the email password. You must also notify the competent supervisory authority of the incident, because this is data theft. And unless you make actions, you will be breaching law. Thank you very much. I hope you were interested in what I said.
Thank you, Mr. Nechiporenko, very much for such an interesting presentation. Now I would like to give the floor to another presenter, that is Thomas Scott, and he's Vice President of Polish National Notaries Council and a notary. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, firstly, I would like to congratulate to our Lithuanian hosts for today's conference. Spring meetings in Vilnius are already becoming our notarial tradition, and tradition is a value very important for the notaries. Unfortunately, the condition of the pandemic mean that not all Polish notaries can participate in person in this conference. So I please to excuse us for it, and just only one for representing our community. Couple words about the personal data in Poland, protection of personal data in Poland. Each of us agrees that his personal data should be protected. No one, without our consent, should be able to collect, process, share it with others, or draw conclusion about us on this basis. But the problem arises when we are the entity collecting, processing, or sharing such data with other people. Especially with this action are not at heart our day-to-day activity. After all, our primary task as a notary is to perform notarial actions and not to process personal data. That is, no one pays us for data processing. This problem became significant on 25th of May 2018, when the provisions of regulation of the European Parliament and the Council on the protection of individuals with regard to the processing of personal data and free movement of such data are entered into force. When referring to the regulation in my speech, I will use GDPR acronym. The new provisions of the GDPR have violently interfered with the sphere of our habits or previous practice. If our actions include the processing of personal data of other people, that we must take into account the new regulation. This entry in force of GDPR was followed by the usual wave of hysterical reaction to the new regulation, and some effects of it become absurd. Entry into force new regulation and new obligation was treated as unnecessary obstacle at our day-to-day work. We can say what Mr. Jourdain of Molière discovered, that he was speaking prose. So the notaries discovered that they processing data. But protection the personal data is nothing new for us. And we notaries have always used the protections mechanism in respect of personal data collected when performing our duties. The instrument when we used for this purpose was common to all of us. It was the notarial professional secrecy. We knew how to keep professional secrets without any new legal regulation. One has to admit that the entry into force of new legislation coincided with the widespread use of new technologies and new tools in our daily practice, such as office software, word processors, internet tools, electronic mail. At the same time, Polish notaries also collect additional data that requires processing and reporting to state authorities, for example, in the field of money laundering. Many of these phenomena have been regulated separately, but many of them not, because they are part of natural technological changes, and we use them in connection with the industrial and social advancement. In the course of discussion on the application of GDPR by Polish notaries, the National Council of Notaries adopted on 4th June 2018 a position on the application of the GDPR provisions in the context of notaries' obligation to maintain professional secrecy. This position aptly points out that in the light of the existing regulation, the obligation of a notary in the field of personal data protection of natural person should be considered from two perspectives. That is, from the perspective of notary as an entrepreneur, and from the perspective of a notary as a person practicing the professional of public trust, which is related to the processing of data of his client. In the first case, when processing personal data, the notary applies the GDPR as an entrepreneur. In the second case, the notary's obligation is the broadly understood scope of personal data protection are determined by the principle of secrecy. The obligation results from Article 18 of the Polish Notarial Law Act. A notary is obliged to keep secret the circumstances of the case which he learned about during the course of the performance of his notarial duties, and has priority in application over the provisions resulting from the GDPR. To sum up, the professional secrecy duty owed by a notary and the specific nature of his protection enable us to take the following position. Article 15, Section 1 and 3, as well Article 19 and Article 21 of the GDPR do not apply to a notary in the scope of activities performed by him under Polish Notary Law Act, as well as in the scope of other preparatory activities undertaken by him in this regard. Such an exclusion was provided for in the draft Act on amending certain Act of law in the part concerning the Notarial Law Act. Article 23 of the GDPR restricts its application inter alia in the law of the member state which the data controller is subject restricts to scope of the obligation and rights provided for Article 12 to 22 and Article 34 as well in Article 5, provided the provisions of the law of the member state correspond to the rights and obligation provided for in Article 12 and 22 GDPR. In connection with the entry into force of the GDPR, the Polish legislator changed the provisions of the existing Act in this regard and introduced a number of new so-called sectoral regulations. The Act of 21 February 2019 amending certain acts to ensure the application of GDPR regulation. According to this new law, added Chapter 8 on personal data processing in Notaries Law Act. The following provisions were introduced. Firstly, Article 78b. The provisions of Article 15, Section 1 and 3, Article 18 and Article 19 of GDPR regulation are applied insofar as they do not constitute a breach by a notary of his obligation to maintain secrecy referred to Article 18 Polish Notarial Act. The provision of Article 21, Section 1 GDPR regulation is not applied for personal data obtained by a notary when performing notarial actions. And the secrecy obligation referred to in Article 18 Polish Notary Law Act does not cease if the President of the Personal Data Protection Office has requested the data obtained when performing notarial action be revealed. And on the end, the period of storing personal data collected by the Polish Notarial Council of Notaries, Councils of Notarial Chambers, and the Examination Committee when performing their duties under the law is for 10 years following the year in which the procedure for which data was collected has been completed. The provision of Articles 90, paragraph 1 applies best by analogy. Today's situation about the protection of personal data in Polish notary is we don't have a code of conduct mentioned in Article 40 GDPR. So any notaries should prepare, we can say, internal bylaws regarding the processing and protection of personal data, including a response to take leakage of such data. In practice, notaries, in order to protect the right of person participating in notarial activities, provide them with information on the processing of personal data, whether in the form of a written notice provided to clients or by displaying them in the office or even by including such information in the notarial instrument drafted as a result of a notarial action performed by the notary. Notaries have in place appropriate safeguards against unauthorized access to the database kept by notaries. Notaries encrypt the email correspondence, in particular the draft of notarial instruments which are sent to their clients. Similar measures are undertaken by the bodies of notarial professional organization. We don't have many information about the breach of security personal data in the notary's office. It's not a problem in Poland. The notaries take good measures to protect this data, and situation in Poland in this matter is not so bad. We can say it's quite good. We are on the medium in Europe about the number of unauthorized access to personal data in general. According to European information from the European authorities, but we should always think about the protection of personal data, because today, in changing world, in changing technologies, it could be dangerous, and it could also involve many costs for the notaries. And it's all. If you have the question to me, I can give you a response. And if you allow me, say 4 words in Lithuanian. Labai ačiū už dėmesį.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Tai dėkojame gerbiamam pranešėjui už iš tiesų labai įdomų asmens duomenų aptarimą Lenkijoje. Ir dabar pagal mūsų programą mes turime pertrauką, ir mes jūs visus pakviesime sugrįžti į seminaro salę 14 val. Dėkoju Jums už dalyvavimą pirmoje dalyje ir
in the first part, and see you soon.